Our story starts not with hard facts, but with a legend as soft as a lullaby. Picture twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, abandoned as babies beside the gentle Tiber River. A she-wolf finds them, not fierce, but nurturing, and feeds them with her milk. This wolf becomes their mother, raising them in the wild, teaching them to be strong but kind. The brothers grow up among shepherds on the Palatine Hill. The air smells of wild herbs and wood smoke. Sheep bells chime softly in the distance. When they come of age, they decide to build a city on these peaceful hills. But brothers sometimes disagree, even in the gentlest of stories. Romulus draws a line in the soft earth around the Palatine Hill. "Here," he says quietly, "will be our city." But Remus, perhaps playfully, steps across the line. In a moment of anger that will echo through history, Romulus strikes his brother down. And so Rome is founded in both love and sorrow, as many great things are. Romulus becomes the first king, ruling justly for 37 peaceful years. The early Romans are simple people. They farm the fertile soil, tend their flocks, and live in round huts with thatched roofs. Smoke drifts lazily from their hearths. Women weave by lamplight while men tell stories of their ancestors. Children play with wooden toys and clay dolls. The rhythm of life is slow, seasonal, connected to the earth. Romulus establishes the basic traditions that will endure for centuries. The Senate, a council of wise elders who meet in the shade of oak trees. The concept of citizenship, belonging to something greater than yourself. And the Roman way of adopting strangers, making them family. Even from the beginning, Rome grows not just by conquest, but by welcoming others. When Romulus dies, the people say he was taken up to heaven during a thunderstorm. But there's no violence in this storm, just mystery, like the mist that rises from the Tiber at dawn. After Romulus comes a parade of kings, each adding their own quiet chapter to Rome's growing story. Let their reigns flow through your mind like a gentle stream. Numa Pompilius, the second king, loves peace above all things. For 43 years, Rome knows no war under his rule. He establishes the calendar, marking the gentle passage of seasons. He builds the first temples, not grand monuments but simple sacred spaces where people can find quiet reflection. Picture him walking through Rome at twilight, an old man with a white beard, ensuring all is well with his people. Tullus Hostilius brings more energy, but still within bounds. He builds the first Senate house, where men gather in togas to debate the affairs of the growing city. The building is simple, with columns that cast long shadows in the afternoon sun. Senators speak in measured tones, their voices echoing softly off marble walls. Ancus Marcius extends Rome's influence to the sea, but gently, through alliances and trade rather than conquest. Imagine Roman merchants traveling dusty roads with their ox-drawn carts, bringing back silk, spices, and stories from distant lands. The city grows richer, but slowly, organically. Then comes Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, Rome's first foreign-born king, an Etruscan who shows how Rome embraces outsiders. He begins the great construction projects that will define the city. The Circus Maximus takes shape, not yet the massive stadium of later centuries, but a simple track where horses thunder past in clouds of dust while crowds cheer lazily in the warm sun. Servius Tullius, the sixth king, builds the first walls around the 7 hills. But these aren't walls of fear. They're gentle boundaries like garden walls defining the sacred space of the city. He also conducts the first census, walking through the streets and counting every citizen, making sure everyone belongs, everyone is accounted for. Finally, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. His very name suggests how the story will end. He becomes harsh, demanding, forgetting the gentle ways of his predecessors. The people grow tired of tyranny, yearning for the peaceful governance of old. And so, in 509 BC, as softly as the dawn breaks over the hills, the Roman Republic is born. The word republic comes from res publica, the public thing, the common good. Imagine a city where decisions belong to everyone, where citizens gather in the forum as equals. The transition from kings to republic happens almost quietly, like leaves changing color in autumn. 2 consuls now rule together, each checking the other's power. Picture them in simple white togas, walking through the morning mist to the Senate house. No crowns, no thrones, just civic duty and shared responsibility. The early republic faces many challenges, but they're met with Roman virtues: discipline, honor, loyalty to the community. When enemies threaten Rome, citizen soldiers pick up their shields and spears, not as professional warriors, but as farmers and craftsmen protecting their homes. One of the most beautiful stories from this time is of Cincinnatus. Rome faces a crisis and they need a dictator, someone with absolute power to save the city. They find Cincinnatus plowing his small farm, soil under his fingernails, sweat on his brow. He accepts the role reluctantly, leads Rome to victory in just 16 days, then quietly returns to his plow. Power held lightly, responsibility embraced without ambition. The plebeians, the common people, gradually win more rights through peaceful persistence. They don't storm the palaces. Instead, they simply leave the city, withdrawing to a hill outside Rome. The patricians, the nobles, realize they need the common people, and compromises are reached. New offices are created. The tribunes of the plebs, champions of ordinary citizens. Picture the Roman Forum during these early Republican days. Not yet the marble wonderland of later centuries, but a simpler place. Vendors selling fresh bread and olive oil. Citizens in rough wool togas debating the issues of the day. Children playing between the columns while their parents conduct business. The pace is unhurried, human-scaled. The 12 Tables, Rome's first written laws, are created around 450 BC. These aren't complex legal codes, but simple rules that everyone can understand. They're carved on bronze tablets and displayed publicly, ensuring that law belongs to everyone, not just the privileged few. Rome begins to expand beyond the 7 hills, but cautiously, often through alliances rather than conquest. The Latin League grows, a confederation of cities that share culture, language, and mutual defense. Its expansion through friendship, through shared values rather than force. But challenges come too. The Gauls, fierce warriors from the north, sack Rome in 390 BC. Picture the terror, but also the resilience. Romans hiding on the Capitoline Hill while their city burns below. Yet they endure, they rebuild, they learn. Each setback makes them stronger, more determined to protect what they've built. The Samnite Wars stretch across decades, testing Roman resolve. These aren't quick campaigns, but long, patient struggles fought in the hills and valleys of central Italy. Roman soldiers march in formation through mountain passes, their armor glinting in the morning sun, their discipline holding firm even when victory seems distant. By 264 BC, Rome controls the entire Italian peninsula. But this isn't the brutal conquest you might imagine. Instead, picture a gradual flowering, like a garden expanding its boundaries season by season. The Romans perfect a system that will serve them for centuries. They make allies, not just subjects. Defeated peoples become partners in the Roman project. Some receive full citizenship. Others become Latin allies with many of the same rights. It's not perfect, but it's revolutionary for its time. The idea that identity can be chosen, not just inherited. Picture a Samnite warrior who fought against Rome, now serving in a Roman legion. His skills are valued, his courage respected. His children grow up speaking both their ancestral language and Latin, seeing themselves as both Samnite and Roman. This flexibility, this ability to absorb others, becomes Rome's greatest strength. The Roman road system begins to spread like veins across Italy. These aren't just military highways, but arteries of culture and commerce. Imagine traveling the Via Appia as it's being built. Crews of workers laying perfectly fitted stones, surveying straight lines across hills and valleys, each mile marked with a milestone, each section engineered to last centuries. Roman colonies are founded throughout Italy, but they're not imposed from above. Veterans receive land grants, starting new communities that blend Roman customs with local traditions. Picture a retired legionnaire teaching his children to read Latin, while his wife tends a garden of native Italian plants. Integration happening at the most personal level. The engineering marvels begin during this period. The first aqueducts bring fresh water to growing cities. Picture the gentle slope of the Aqua Appia, carrying pure mountain water across the countryside to Rome. Roman engineers learning to work with gravity and flow, creating systems that will endure for millennia. But expansion brings new challenges. The Gallic invasions force Romans to think beyond Italy. Celtic warriors pour south from the Alpine passes, fierce, undisciplined, but numerous. Roman tactics evolve. The manipular system replaces the rigid phalanx, giving legions flexibility to adapt to different enemies and terrain. Picture a Roman general studying maps by lamplight, planning not just for the next battle but for the next generation. Roman strategy always thinks long-term, building for permanence rather than quick gains. Each victory must lead to lasting peace, each conquest to stable integration. The first Roman navy takes shape during this period, almost by accident. Romans are traditionally land people, uncomfortable on the rolling sea, but necessity drives innovation. Picture Roman carpenters studying captured Carthaginian ships, learning to build their own. The corvus, the boarding bridge, allows Roman soldiers to fight naval battles like land battles, turning their weakness into strength. Italian unification isn't just political, but cultural. The Latin language begins to spread not through force, but through utility. Traders need a common tongue. Veterans teach it to their families. Local elites learn it to participate in the broader Roman world. The great Italian dialects don't disappear overnight, but gradually blend with Latin, creating the rich linguistic heritage of modern Italy. Now begins the greatest test in Roman history, the struggle with the Carthage that will determine whether Rome remains a regional power or becomes master of the Mediterranean world. But even in war, let the story flow gently, like waves lapping at a peaceful shore. Carthage sits across the sea in North Africa, a merchant empire grown rich from trade. Picture Carthaginian ships with purple sails gliding between ports from Spain to Egypt, their holds full of silver, silk, and spices. Two civilizations so different. Rome built on citizen soldiers and civic duty, Carthage on trade and mercenary armies. The First Punic War begins almost accidentally, over Sicily in 264 BC. Neither side expects a struggle that will last 24 years. Picture the first Roman fleet, clumsy copies of Carthaginian designs, setting sail for Sicily. Roman soldiers, most who've never seen the sea, gripping the rails as their ships rise and fall with the swells. The war develops its own rhythm, victories and defeats alternating like seasons. Romans learn seamanship through bitter experience. The Battle of Mylae sees Roman ships using the corvus for the first time, turning naval combat into something Romans understand. Picture boarding planks crashing down onto enemy decks, legionnaires charging across with shields high and swords ready. But the sea takes its toll. Storms swallow entire fleets. Picture the survivors washing up on Italian beaches, salt-crusted and exhausted, carrying news of disaster. Yet Rome rebuilds again and again. Citizens melt down their jewelry to fund new fleets. The wealthy contribute their fortunes without complaint. This isn't conquest for glory but survival itself. The peace that comes in 241 BC feels like blessed relief. Sicily becomes Rome's first overseas province, a precedent that will reshape the world. But peace with Carthage proves fragile, like morning frost that melts at the first hint of sun. 23 years pass. A new generation grows up, and then the Second Punic War explodes across the Mediterranean. This time the antagonist has a name that will echo through history: Hannibal Barca, son of Hamilcar, trained from childhood to hate Rome. Picture Hannibal as a young man in Spain, brilliant, charismatic, burning with purpose. He builds an army not just of Carthaginians but of Spaniards, Gauls, Africans, all united in their desire to humble Rome. His plan is audacious beyond imagination: march from Spain, across the Alps, and strike Rome in her heartland. The crossing of the Alps in 218 BC becomes legendary. Picture the massive army winding through mountain passes as winter closes in. Elephants trumpeting in the thin air, soldiers wrapping their feet in cloth and hide against the snow. Avalanches thunder down into the valleys. Men freeze to death in their sleep. Yet somehow, impossibly, Hannibal emerges into northern Italy with an army intact. The Roman response shows their character. No panic, no despair, just grim determination. Consul after consul marches north to face this threat. Trebia, Trasimene, Cannae, each battle a disaster, each defeat teaching lessons that will eventually bring victory. Cannae, fought on a hot August day in 216 BC, becomes a masterpiece of tactics. Hannibal draws the Romans into a trap, his forces bending back like a bow before snapping shut around them. In one afternoon, Rome loses more soldiers than America lost in the entire Vietnam War. Picture the field afterward, bodies stretching to the horizon under the merciless sun. But Rome doesn't surrender. The Senate meets in emergency session and declares, "We do not speak of peace while an enemy remains on Italian soil." New armies are raised from slaves, from boys barely old enough to carry a sword, from old men who thought their fighting days were done. Fabius Maximus earns the nickname Cunctator, the delayer, for his strategy of avoiding pitched battles. Instead, he shadows Hannibal's army, cutting supply lines, picking off stragglers, slowly strangling the invaders. Picture Roman scouts watching from hilltops as Carthaginian camps burn in the valleys below. smoke rising straight up in the still air. For 13 years, Hannibal wanders Italy like a ghost, winning battles but unable to win the war. Rome's alliance system holds. Most Italian cities remain loyal, understanding that their fate is tied to Rome's. The Carthaginian army gradually shrinks, worn down by constant marching, fighting, the simple attrition of being far from home. Meanwhile, young Publius Cornelius Scipio learns Hannibal's own tactics and carries the war to Spain, then to Africa itself. Picture him as a young general, brilliant like his enemy, studying maps of North Africa by lamplight. He understands that to defeat Hannibal, you must threaten Carthage itself. The final confrontation comes at Zama in 202 BC. Two great generals face each other across a dusty plain in Tunisia. Hannibal's war elephants charge the Roman lines, but Scipio has prepared gaps in his formation. The massive beasts thunder harmlessly through, trumpeting their confusion. The battle that follows decides the fate of the ancient world. When it ends, Carthage lies prostrate. Picture the proud city's walls torn down, her fleet burned on the beaches, her empire dissolved. Hannibal himself flees into exile, spending his remaining years as a wandering advisor to Rome's enemies, always plotting one final campaign that never comes. The Third Punic War, beginning in 149 BC, is less a war than an execution. Rome, now confident in her power, finds excuses to destroy Carthage completely. Picture Cato the Elder ending every speech in the Senate with "Carthage must be destroyed," his voice echoing off the marble walls. The siege lasts 3 years. Picture the final assault in 146 BC. Roman legions breaking through walls that have stood for centuries, fighting through streets their grandfathers' enemies once ruled. The city burns for 17 days. Survivors are sold into slavery. Salt is scattered on the ruins, ensuring nothing will grow there again. With Carthage destroyed, Rome stands alone as master of the Western Mediterranean. But victory brings new challenges, new questions about what it means to be Roman in a world where Rome has no equals. With Carthage defeated, Rome turns her attention eastward toward the ancient kingdoms born from Alexander's conquests. But this expansion feels different. Less desperate than the Punic Wars, more like a river flowing naturally toward the sea. Picture the Eastern Mediterranean in 200 BC, ancient kingdoms rich with the accumulated culture of centuries. Egypt under the Ptolemies with Alexandria's great library holding the wisdom of the world. Syria under the Seleucids, controlling trade routes to India and China. Macedonia, still proud of producing Alexander the Great. These are not barbarian tribes but sophisticated civilizations older than Rome itself. The Macedonian Wars unfold gradually, almost reluctantly. Picture Roman ambassadors in togas arriving at Hellenistic courts, their simple clothing contrasting with the silk and gold of Eastern monarchs. Rome doesn't seek conquest initially, just seeks to prevent any single power from dominating the region. Philip V of Macedonia makes the mistake of allying with Hannibal during the Second Punic War. Once Carthage is defeated, Romans remember this betrayal. The war that follows shows how Roman military tactics have evolved. Picture the Battle of Cynocephalae in 197 BC, the rigid Macedonian phalanx, with its forest of 20-foot spears, facing the flexible Roman manipular system. The phalanx works well on level ground, but Roman centurions know how to break formation, exploit gaps, adapt to terrain. Picture Roman hastati charging uphill with sword and shield, getting inside the reach of those long spears, turning discipline against itself. Victory brings Rome face to face with Greek culture for the first time on a massive scale. Picture Roman soldiers walking through conquered Greek cities, marveling at marble statues of gods and heroes, trying to understand poetry recited in languages they don't recognize. Some Romans, like Cato the Elder, worry that Greek sophistication will corrupt Roman simplicity. But others, like Scipio Africanus, embrace Greek learning. Picture him in his villa outside Rome, studying Greek philosophy by lamplight, his library filled with scrolls brought back from Eastern campaigns. The tension between tradition and cosmopolitanism will define Roman culture for centuries to come. Antiochus III of Syria provides the next challenge. Known as the Great, he dreams of rebuilding Alexander's empire. Picture his massive army crossing into Greece. Seleucid phalangites, cataphract cavalry in scale armor, war elephants from India, mercenaries from across the known world. The Battle of Thermopylae in 191 BC echoes the famous Persian defeat 3 centuries earlier, but with Romans playing the role of Greeks. Picture Cato the Elder himself leading a flanking force through the mountain paths Ephialtes once used to betray Leonidas. History repeats but with different actors. The decisive battle comes at Magnesia in 190 BC. Antiochus fields perhaps 75,000 men, the largest army Romans have yet faced. But numbers don't determine victory. Picture Roman cavalry, trained by Scipio Africanus himself, routing the Seleucid horse. The king's war elephants, panicked by Roman javelin fire, turn back through their own lines, trampling Syrian phalanxes in their terror. With Syria defeated, only Egypt remains independent in the east, and the Ptolemies are too weak to threaten Rome. Picture Cleopatra VII, still generations in the future, as Egyptian power slowly declines. The great lighthouse of Alexandria still guides ships into harbor, but the kingdom that built it grows ever more dependent on Roman protection. Roman expansion into Asia Minor and Greece happens almost by default. Local rulers bequest their kingdoms to Rome in their wills, preferring Roman rule to civil war. Picture the reading of such a will in the Roman Senate. I, Attalus III of Pergamon, being of sound mind, do hereby leave my kingdom to the Roman people. But conquest brings unexpected problems. Wealth flows into Rome from tribute and plunder, gold from Gallic temples, silver from Spanish mines, silk and spices from Asian trade routes. Picture Roman noble houses growing rich beyond imagination, their courtyards filled with Greek statues, their tables laden with exotic foods. The old Roman virtues begin to strain under prosperity. Why live simply when you can afford luxury? Why serve the state when private wealth brings greater rewards? Picture young Roman nobles dressing in silk instead of wool, speaking Greek instead of Latin, more interested in philosophy than military service. Slave labor floods the Italian countryside as prisoners of war are put to work on vast estates. Picture the latifundia, huge plantations worked by chained gangs producing grain and olive oil for export. Small Roman farmers, the backbone of the Republic's military, find they can't compete with slave-grown crops. Many sell their farms and drift to Rome, joining a growing urban mob dependent on state handouts. Picture the narrow streets of the Subura, Rome's poorest district, crowded with former farmers, discharged soldiers, freed slaves, all struggling to survive in a city that no longer has room for them. Yet Roman culture also flourishes during this period of expansion. Picture Plautus and Terence adapting Greek comedies for Roman audiences, their plays performed in temporary wooden theaters during religious festivals. The works blend Greek sophistication with Roman earthiness, creating something entirely new. Roman engineering reaches new heights. The first stone bridges span the Tiber, picture workers laying massive blocks with mathematical precision, creating arches that will carry traffic for 2,000 years. Roman architects learn from Greek models but adapt them to Roman needs. More practical, more durable, more focused on utility than pure beauty. The expansion eastward transforms Rome from an Italian city-state into a Mediterranean empire, but the Romans themselves are transformed in the process. They remain conquerors, but they're also becoming something new. Cosmopolitan, sophisticated, complex. The simple virtues of the early republic survive, but they're now part of a much larger, more complicated story. By 150 BC, Rome rules most of the known world. But success brings problems the founders never imagined. Picture the city itself, swollen beyond recognition, filled with wealth and want existing side by side. Traditional ways struggling against foreign influences. The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, try to heal Rome's growing wounds through reform. Picture Tiberius Gracchus in 133 BC, a young tribune standing before the popular assembly. He's aristocratic by birth but populist by conviction, seeing clearly how conquest has enriched the few while impoverishing the many. His land reform bill is simple in concept: redistribute public land to landless citizens. Picture Roman veterans, men who fought for years in Spain or Macedonia, returning home to find their small farms ruined by neglect, their families scattered to Rome's slums. The rich have occupied the public lands, working them with slave gangs while citizen soldiers starve. But reform threatens established interests. Picture the Roman Senate in heated debate, elderly patricians in pristine togas arguing that tradition must be preserved. They see Tiberius not as a reformer, but as a revolutionary, dangerous to the established order. The conflict comes to a head during an assembly meeting. Picture the scene: supporters and opponents crowding the forum, voices rising in anger, the careful procedures of Republican government breaking down under pressure. When Tiberius seeks re-election as tribune, unprecedented, possibly illegal. His enemies act. The first outbreak of organized political violence in the Forum leaves Tiberius and 300 of his supporters dead. Picture their bodies lying among the marble columns where Roman law was supposed to reign supreme. The Republic has drawn blood from itself for the first time. 10 years later, Gaius Gracchus takes up his brother's cause. More cautious but equally determined, he builds a broader coalition. Picture him addressing crowds in the Forum, his voice carrying across the packed space, promising grain subsidies, public works, colonies for the landless. For a moment, it seems reform might succeed, but history repeats its tragedy. Picture the final confrontation on the Aventine Hill in 121 BC. Gaius and his supporters barricade themselves in the Temple of Diana, while Senate forces surround them. The consul Opimius, armed with emergency powers, orders the attack. When it ends, another Gracchus brother lies dead, along with 3,000 of his followers. The Republic has survived, but something essential has been lost. Picture Roman citizens walking past bloodstains on the Forum stones, wondering if the old ways can ever return. The precedent is set. Political differences can be settled by violence. Emergency powers can override traditional law. Gaius Marius emerges from this chaos as a military reformer. Picture him as a rough soldier from the Italian countryside, risen through merit rather than birth. His voice carries the accent of farmers and workmen, not the polished tones of noble families. Marius transforms the Roman army from a citizen militia into a professional force. The old system required soldiers to provide their own equipment, limiting service to men wealthy enough to afford weapons and armor. Picture the new legions, landless volunteers equipped at state expense, serving not for a season but for decades, loyal not to Rome in abstract but to the general who feeds and pays them. The Cimbrian Teutones, Germanic tribes migrating south in search of land, provide the first test of Marius's reforms. Picture these barbarian warriors, tall, fair-haired, fierce, traveling with their families in ox-drawn wagons. They've already destroyed several Roman armies, causing panic in a city that hasn't faced serious invasion since Hannibal. Marius trains his new legions with typical Roman thoroughness. Picture recruits drilling endlessly in camps outside Rome, learning to march in formation, to throw javelins with precision, to fight as a unit rather than individual heroes. Each soldier carries a standardized kit: sword, shield, javelin, entrenching tools, personal equipment, everything needed to build a fortified camp each evening. The victories at Aquae Sextiae and Vercelli in 102 and 101 BC end the Germanic threat decisively. Picture battlefields littered with barbarian dead, Roman legions standing in perfect formation amid the carnage. Marius returns to Rome as a hero, elected consul and unprecedented 6 times. But Marius's reforms have unintended consequences. Picture Roman generals realizing that armies loyal to them personally could serve political ambitions as well as military needs. The seeds of civil war are planted in the very reforms that save the Republic from external enemies. Lucius Cornelius Sulla provides the next chapter in Rome's growing troubles. Aristocratic where Marius was populist, reactionary where Marius was reformist, he represents everything the Gracchi fought against. Picture him as a young man serving under Marius in Africa, learning military skills while nurturing political ambitions. The social war erupts in 91 BC when Rome's Italian allies finally demand citizenship. Picture Samnite and Latin warriors, men who fought beside Romans for centuries, taking up arms against their former partners. They're not seeking independence but inclusion, not rejection of Roman identity, but full participation in it. The war proves that Rome's alliance system, brilliant for centuries, has reached its limits. Picture Italian cities issuing their own coins, establishing their own government, calling themselves Italia in conscious opposition to Rome. Yet even in rebellion, they model their institutions on Roman examples, showing how thoroughly Roman culture has spread. Rome wins the war militarily but loses it politically. Citizenship is granted to all Italians, doubling the number of Roman citizens almost overnight. Picture the practical problems. How to conduct elections when voters are scattered from the Alps to southern Italy. How to maintain Roman identity when so many Romans aren't from Rome. The Republic adapts as it always has, but the strain shows. Picture the Forum during elections, packed with new citizens whose Latin carries regional accents, whose understanding of Roman tradition comes from recent study rather than ancestral memory. The old intimacy of city-state governance gives way to something more complex and impersonal. Marius and Sulla, once allies, become bitter enemies as personal and political rivalries merge. Their conflict will soon explode into the first full-scale Roman civil war, testing whether the Republic can survive when Romans fight Romans with the same intensity once reserved for foreign enemies. As the sun sets on the 2nd century BC, Rome stands at the height of her power but faces her greatest crisis. The Republic that conquered the Mediterranean world struggles to govern itself, and the very success that brought glory now threatens destruction. The first civil war between Marius and Sulla erupts in 88 BC, shattering the fundamental assumption that political competition remains within bounds. Picture Roman legions marching on Rome itself, citizen soldiers attacking the city they're sworn to protect. The sight of Roman eagles advancing on Roman walls marks the beginning of the end for Republican government. Sulla marches on Rome to claim command of the war against Mithridates VI of Pontus. Picture this Eastern king as a throwback to Alexander's successors. Cultured, ruthless, dreaming of driving Rome from Asia. He orchestrates the massacre of 80,000 Romans and Italians in a single day, showing that Roman expansion has created enemies as determined as they are sophisticated. While Sulla campaigns in the east, Marius seizes Rome through his own armed coup. Picture the old general, now past 70, consumed by ambition and revenge. His supporters compile death lists, hunting down Sulla's allies through the city streets. The Forum, once a place of debate, becomes a killing ground where severed heads decorate the speaker's platform. When Sulla returns from Asia in 83 BC, he brings veteran legions hardened by Eastern warfare. The ensuing civil war devastates Italy. Picture armies that learned their trade fighting Gauls and Germans now turning those skills against each other. Cities that welcomed Roman rule centuries earlier find themselves under siege by Romans fighting Romans. Sulla's victory inaugurates the first systematic political purge in Roman history. Picture the prescription lists posted in the Forum, names of senators, equities, anyone wealthy enough to be worth killing. Property confiscated, families destroyed, the survivors fleeing into exile or hiding. The young Julius Caesar narrowly escapes death only through the intervention of influential relatives. Yet Sulla, having seized absolute power, does something unexpected. He tries to restore the old republic. Picture him in the dictator's chair, drafting constitutional reforms designed to strengthen the Senate and limit popular assemblies. His laws increase the number of magistrates, expand the courts, regulate provincial commands, all aimed at preventing another strongman like himself. In 79 BC, Sulla retires voluntarily to his villa in Campania, the first Roman to surrender supreme power by choice since Cincinnatus. Picture him in his final year, writing memoirs, tending his gardens, perhaps wondering if his constitutional reforms will outlive him. His death in 78 BC removes the last check on ambitious men who've learned that armies can trump laws. Pompey the Great emerges as Sulla's heir, though he's too young to hold senior office legally. Picture this golden youth, handsome, charismatic, ambitious, skilled at war but naive about politics. His campaigns in Spain against Sertorius, in the Mediterranean against pirates, in the east against Mithridates, make him Rome's most successful general. But Pompey's very success threatens the republican balance. Picture his triumph in 61 BC, a 3-day celebration displaying the wealth of conquered kingdoms, exotic animals, captive princes, enough treasure to fund the state for years. He's added more territory to Rome than any man since the Punic Wars, but his fellow senators fear what he might demand in return. Meanwhile, a more subtle threat develops in Gaius Julius Caesar. Picture him as a young man, tall, pale, balding prematurely, possessed of an intelligence and ambition that dwarfs even Pompey's. Unlike Pompey, who seeks glory through military conquest, Caesar understands that lasting power requires political skill. Caesar's rise follows the cursus honorum, the ladder of offices every ambitious Roman must climb. Picture him as quaestor in Spain, discovering the tomb of Alexander the Great and weeping that his own achievements pale beside the Macedonians. As aedile, he stages games so magnificent that he bankrupts himself, but wins the people's adoration. The first triumvirate forms in 60 BC, though it's not officially called that. Picture 3 men meeting in secret. Caesar, needing a consulship to advance his career. Pompey, needing land for his veterans. Crassus, needing a military command to match his rival's glory. Together they have enough influence to control the state, dividing power among themselves while maintaining the fiction of republican government. Caesar's consulship in 59 BC shows how far the republic has fallen. Picture him forcing through legislation while his colleague Bibulus hides at home, too intimidated to appear in public. The Senate's opposition means nothing when Caesar can appeal directly to the popular assemblies, backed by Pompey's veterans and Crassus's wealth. As proconsul of Gaul, Caesar begins the campaigns that will make him immortal. Picture the ancient forests of Gaul, dark, mysterious, inhabited by Celtic tribes who practice human sacrifice and worship gods in sacred groves. The Helvetii begin the adventure by migrating toward Roman territory, forcing Caesar to act. The Gallic Wars unfold like a series of connected stories, each campaign building on the last. Picture Celtic warriors with lime-washed hair and blue war paint, charging Roman lines with wild courage but little discipline. Caesar's commentaries, written in elegant third person, describe battles where Roman engineering and discipline gradually overcome Gallic bravery. Vercingetorix emerges as Caesar's greatest opponent, young, charismatic, capable of uniting fractious Gallic tribes against the common enemy. Picture him as a Celtic prince turned revolutionary, abandoning the comfortable life of a Roman client to lead his people's desperate fight for freedom. The siege of Alesia in 52 BC becomes Caesar's masterpiece. Picture Roman legions building two sets of walls, one to keep the Gauls in, another to keep relieving forces out. Trapped between these fortifications, Vercingetorix watches his people starve, while Caesar's engineers demonstrate Roman superiority in the arts of war. When Vercingetorix surrenders to save his people, picture the ceremony, the proud Gallic chief throwing his weapons at Caesar's feet, knowing he'll spend years in a Roman prison before dying in a triumph. His sacrifice doesn't save Gallic independence, but it preserves Gallic honor. Caesar's conquest adds all of modern France, Belgium, and parts of Germany and Britain to the Roman Empire. Picture the wealth flowing back to Rome. Gold from sacred groves, silver from mountain streams, slaves by the hundreds of thousands. Caesar uses this treasure to buy political support, funding public works and games that make him popular with the masses. But conquest also creates a military machine loyal to Caesar personally. Picture his legions, hardened by 8 years of constant warfare, enriched by plunder, bound to their general by shared danger and mutual trust. They call him Imperator, commander, but the title carries implications that threaten the Republic. The triumvirate dissolves when Crassus dies fighting. The Parthians at Carrhae in 53 BC. Picture this richest man in Rome, who once boasted he could fund an army from his personal fortune, fleeing across Syrian deserts while Parthian horse archers hunt him like a wild animal. His death leaves only Caesar and Pompey to divide the Roman world. Julia's death the same year removes the personal bond between the two rivals. She was Caesar's daughter and Pompey's beloved wife. Picture Pompey genuinely grieving, this hard man softened by love, now left alone with his ambitions and fears. Without Julia's influence, reconciliation becomes impossible. The Senate, terrified of Caesar's growing power, allies with Pompey despite decades of mutual suspicion. Picture elderly senators who remember the civil wars swallowing their pride, choosing the devil they know over the one they fear. They demand Caesar return to Rome as a private citizen, vulnerable to prosecution by his enemies. Caesar's response comes in January 49 BC at the Rubicon River, the boundary between Gaul and Italy. Picture the scene. A cold winter night, the small stream black under starlight, Caesar's veterans waiting silently while their general makes the choice that will determine Rome's future. The die is cast, he says, and spurs his horse into the water. The die indeed is cast. Within 60 days, Pompey and the Republican government flee Italy, abandoning Rome to Caesar. Picture the speed of this campaign. Caesar's veterans marching down familiar Italian roads while Pompey's raw recruits scatter before them. Towns that resisted Hannibal for years surrender to Caesar without a fight. The civil war that follows engulfs the Mediterranean world. Picture battles fought in Spain, Africa, Egypt, Asia. Every province drawn into a conflict between Romans who can't share power. At Dyrrhachium, Pompey wins a tactical victory that might have ended the war but fails to follow up. At Pharsalus, Caesar's veterans prove their superiority in the climactic battle that decides the Republic's fate. Pompey's death in Egypt, murdered on a beach by advisors who think they're doing Caesar a favor, removes honor from victory. Picture Caesar weeping over his rival's severed head, genuine grief mixed with political calculation. He'd hoped for reconciliation, not assassination. Egypt provides Caesar with Cleopatra, the last pharaoh and perhaps the most intelligent woman of the ancient world. Picture her arriving at Caesar's quarters hidden in a carpet. Not just seduction, but political theater, showing she understands how to capture Roman imagination. Their affair produces a son, and an alliance that reshapes Eastern politics. Caesar's return to Rome brings unprecedented honors and powers. Picture his quadruple triumph in 46 BC, 4 separate parades celebrating victories over Gauls, Egyptians, Pontians, and Africans. The crowds cheer, but many notice the absence of Roman enemies from his victory processions, a reminder that this triumph celebrates civil war. As dictator, Caesar launches reforms that show his vision extends beyond personal power. Picture him reviewing census rolls, planning colonies for veterans, reforming the calendar, extending citizenship to Gauls and Spaniards. His projects would take decades to complete, requiring stability the Republic can't provide. But stability requires trust, and trust is what Caesar cannot build. Picture the Senate meetings during his dictatorship. Senators sitting in sullen silence while Caesar announces decisions already made. The forms of republican government continue, but their substance has evaporated. The conspiracy that kills Caesar forms slowly, like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. Picture Marcus Brutus wrestling with his conscience, knowing Caesar loves him like a son, but believing the Republic demands sacrifice. Cassius provides the hatred, Brutus the moral authority, dozens of others the necessary numbers, the Ides of March. 4 BC. Picture Caesar walking to the Senate meeting despite warnings and omens, his confidence perhaps masking fatigue with the burden of absolute power. The senators gather around him as if to present a petition, then 23 daggers strike almost simultaneously. Caesar's last words, whether et tu brute, or the Greek kaisou teknon, express not just surprise but heartbreak. Picture him covering his face when he sees Brutus among his killers, understanding that even paternal love can't overcome political principle. The assassins expect the Republic to revive spontaneously with the tyrant dead. Instead, picture Rome in chaos. Caesar's supporters and enemies eyeing each other suspiciously while his body lies bleeding at the base of Pompey's statue. The conspirators have killed Caesar, but they haven't killed Caesarism. Mark Antony seizes the initiative with his funeral oration, turning public opinion against the liberators. Picture his speech in the Forum, Caesar's bloodied toga displayed for all to see, his will read aloud revealing generous bequests to every Roman citizen. The crowd that cheered Caesar's death now howls for his killer's blood. But the real inheritor of Caesar's legacy is an 18-year-old youth named Gaius Octavius, Caesar's great-nephew and adopted son. Picture him receiving news of the assassination while studying in Greece. A pale, sickly boy who nevertheless possesses Caesar's intelligence and ruthlessness without his mercy. History will know him as Augustus, the first Roman emperor, but he begins as simply Octavian, Caesar's heir. The Republic dies not in a single moment but through a series of compromises and betrayals, each seeming reasonable at the time. Picture the Roman constitution like a building whose foundations have shifted. The structure still stands, but cracks appear in every wall, and eventually, the whole edifice must fall. From the chaos following Caesar's assassination, a new order emerges, not through revolution, but through the patient work of a young man who understands that lasting power must seem legitimate. Picture Octavian in 44 BC, barely 18, physically frail, politically inexperienced, yet carrying the most potent name in Rome. The Second Triumvirate forms in 43 BC with grim efficiency. Picture 3 men meeting on an island in the Reno River, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Lepidus, dividing the Roman world among themselves while compiling death lists of their enemies. Unlike Caesar's secret alliance with Pompey and Crassus, this triumvirate operates openly, its power backed by law. The prescriptions that follow make Sulla's purges seem restrained. Picture Rome's streets running red while triumviral agents hunt down senators, knights, anyone whose wealth might fund their cause or whose opposition threatens their plans. Cicero, the Republic's greatest orator, dies trying to flee, his hands and head displayed in the Forum where his voice once defended liberty. Brutus and Cassius, the Republic's last champions, gather forces in the east for a final confrontation. Picture these noble Romans learning the hard lesson that moral authority means little without military power. Their armies consist largely of non-Roman auxiliaries fighting for pay rather than principle. The Battle of Philippi in 42 BC ends the Republican cause forever. Picture two engagements fought among Macedonian hills where Alexander once trained his phalanxes. In the first battle, Brutus defeats Octavian while Antony crushes Cassius. In the second, 3 weeks later, Antony and Octavian together destroy Brutus's remaining forces. Brutus's suicide, falling on his sword while quoting Greek poetry about virtue, provides a fitting end to the Roman Republic. Picture him in his final moments. The descendant of the Brutus who expelled the last king, dying for principles his ancestors established 6 centuries earlier. With him dies the last hope that Romans can govern themselves without a master. The triumvirs divide the spoils. Antony takes the wealthy east, Octavian the challenging west, Lepidus the barren provinces of Africa. Picture this partition as temporary necessity, rather than permanent solution. Each man knowing that eventually, only one can rule the Roman world. Octavian's early years as triumvir reveal qualities that will serve him throughout his career. Picture him dealing with Sextus Pompey, who controls Sicily and threatens Rome's grain supply. Rather than rushing into battle, Octavian builds a navy, trains his crews, and wins through preparation rather than inspiration. The Perusine War against Antony's brother shows Octavian's ruthlessness. Picture the siege of Perugia, Roman legions starving out Roman citizens while Octavian waits patiently outside the walls. When the city surrenders, he orders the execution of the city council, showing that mercy is a luxury he can't afford. Meanwhile, Antony luxuriates in the east, seduced by Hellenistic culture and Egyptian wealth. Picture him in Alexandria, dressed in silk instead of wool, speaking Greek instead of Latin, presenting himself as the new Dionysus to Cleopatra's Isis. His adoption of Eastern customs scandalizes traditional Romans. The marriage between Octavian's sister Octavia and Mark Antony in 40 BC represents an attempt at reconciliation. Picture this political wedding. A virtuous Roman matron wed to a man whose heart lies elsewhere. Their union symbolizing hopes for peace that neither husband nor wife really believes possible. But Antony's return to Cleopatra makes reconciliation impossible. Picture their relationship not as simple lust but as political alliance. Cleopatra needs Roman protection. Antony needs Egyptian wealth. Both dream of empire that transcends traditional boundaries between East and West. Octavian proves masterful at propaganda warfare, presenting himself as defender of Roman tradition against Oriental decadence. Picture his supporters in the Forum denouncing Antony's marriages to Cleopatra, his donations of Roman territory to their children, his supposed plans to move the capital to Alexandria. The donations of Alexandria in 34 BC provide perfect ammunition for Octavian's campaign. Picture the ceremony. Antony and Cleopatra seated on golden thrones, distributing Roman provinces to their children as if they owned them personally. To Romans, this looks like treason dressed up as triumph. When Antony divorces Octavia to marry Cleopatra formally, he gives Octavian the moral high ground in any future conflict. Picture Octavia returning to Rome, dignified in her grief, a living symbol of Antony's betrayal of Roman values. Her very presence becomes propaganda for her brother's cause. The final war begins in 32 BC, not as civil war, but as foreign conflict against Egypt. Picture Octavian's brilliant strategy. By declaring war on Cleopatra rather than Antony, he avoids the charge of making Romans fight Romans. Antony becomes not a rival but a traitor, corrupted by foreign influence. The Battle of Actium on September 2, 30 BC decides the fate of the ancient world in a single afternoon. Picture the naval engagement. Octavian's lighter, more maneuverable ships surrounding Antony's massive quinqueremes. When Cleopatra's squadron flees, taking Egyptian treasure to safety, Antony follows, abandoning his fleet and his cause for love. But the real victory comes afterward, as Antony's demoralized forces surrender without significant resistance. Picture Octavian's clemency toward his enemies, calculated mercy that wins more support than harsh punishment would. He's learned from Caesar's mistakes, understanding that reconciliation must follow victory. Antony and Cleopatra's suicide in Alexandria provides a romantic end to the Hellenistic age. Picture their final months, former rulers reduced to desperate expedients, sending embassies that go unanswered, planning escapes that lead nowhere. Their deaths remove the last obstacle to Octavian's supremacy. Cleopatra's death, whether by snake bite or poison, ends the Ptolemaic dynasty that ruled Egypt for 3 centuries. Picture the last pharaoh dying in her palace while Roman legions march through Alexandria's streets, her kingdom becoming simply another Roman province. Octavian returns to Rome in 29 BC as undisputed master of the Mediterranean world. Picture his triple triumph, 3 separate celebrations for victories in Illyricum, at Actium, and in Egypt. Unlike Caesar's controversial triumph, this celebration seems natural, appropriate, welcomed by citizens who've endured 20 years of civil war. The Temple of Janus is closed for the first time in over 2 centuries, symbolizing universal peace under Octavian's rule. Picture the ceremony, the ancient doors swinging shut while priests offer sacrifices for continued tranquility. Peace comes not through negotiation, but through the elimination of all who might disturb it. Yet, Octavian faces the same problem that destroyed Caesar: how to maintain power without seeming to threaten republican traditions. Picture him in these crucial years, still young but already showing the political genius that will define his reign. He must become emperor while appearing to restore the republic. The solution comes through a series of careful steps, each seeming to restore traditional government while actually consolidating personal rule. Picture the Senate meetings where Octavian reluctantly accepts powers thrust upon him by grateful legislators, his modesty masking ambition as vast as Caesar's but more patient. In 27 BC, Octavian formally restores the republic, laying down his extraordinary powers and returning control to the Senate and people. Picture this theatrical performance: the master of the world playing the role of humble citizen, accepting only those honors that grateful senators insist upon. The title Augustus, the revered one, captures his new status perfectly. Picture the moment when this name is first spoken in the Senate. Not quite royal, not quite divine, but something entirely new in Roman experience. Augustus has been born, and with him, the Roman Empire. The Augustan settlement creates the illusion of restored republican government while establishing monarchical power. Picture the careful balance. Augustus holds proconsular authority over frontier provinces where the legions are stationed, while the Senate governs peaceful territories. The republic continues in form while empire begins in fact. Augustus's marriage to Livia in 38 BC proves crucial to his success. Picture this remarkable woman, intelligent, ambitious, devoted to her husband's career but never overshadowing his authority. She becomes the model of imperial wifehood, wielding influence through traditional roles rather than direct power. The Praetorian Guard, established to protect Augustus personally, represents a new element in Roman politics. Picture these elite soldiers, better paid and equipped than regular legionaries, stationed in Rome itself, their loyalty focused on the emperor rather than the state. They're a bodyguard, but they're also a statement about where real power lies. Augustus's building program transforms Rome from a city of brick into a city of marble. Picture the Forum of Augustus with its temple to Mars the Avenger, commemorating vengeance taken on Caesar's assassins. Each new building reinforces the message that the old chaos has ended, replaced by order, beauty, and permanence. The Res Gestae, Augustus's own account of his achievements, provides the official version of his rise to power. Picture this document, carved on bronze tablets and displayed throughout the empire, a masterpiece of political propaganda that presents civil war as liberation, monarchy as restoration, conquest as pacification. But beneath the propaganda lies genuine achievement. Picture the Roman world in 14 AD, when Augustus dies peacefully in his bed, frontiers secure, provinces prosperous, civil wars ended, culture flourishing. Whatever the cost in republican liberty, the Augustan peace has brought benefits that justify its existence. Augustus dies in 14 AD after ruling for 45 years, longer than most Romans can remember. Picture his deathbed scene. The first emperor surrounded by family and advisors, concern for the succession weighing on everyone's minds. His last words, reportedly asking if he'd played his part well in the comedy of life, show the theatrical nature of imperial power. Tiberius becomes the second emperor reluctantly, or so he claims. Picture this stern, capable man, already in his 50s, hardened by military command, psychologically damaged by Augustus's treatment of him as second choice for succession. His reign begins the pattern that will define the early empire. Competent administration shadowed by personal dysfunction. The Praetorian Guard's role in imperial succession becomes clear during Tiberius's reign. Picture Sejanus, the Praetorian prefect, accumulating power while the emperor retreats to Capri. For a moment, it seems the guards might choose emperors rather than merely protecting them. Tiberius's eventual purge of Sejanus shows that even from his island retreat, the emperor remains master. Caligula's reign reveals the empire's greatest weakness: what happens when absolute power falls to an unworthy heir. Picture this young man, beloved as the army's mascot, his nickname means Little Boots, transforming into a monster when given unlimited authority. His brief reign shows how quickly imperial virtue can become imperial vice. Whether Caligula is truly mad or merely drunk on power matters less than the precedent he sets. Picture him declaring war on Neptune and ordering soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of victory. His assassination by the Praetorian Guard establishes another dangerous precedent. Guards can kill emperors as well as protect them. Claudius becomes emperor almost by accident, found hiding behind curtains in the palace while guards search for surviving Julio Claudians. Picture this unlikely ruler, scholarly, stuttering, ignored by his family but possessing real administrative talent. His reign proves that competence matters more than charisma in governing a vast empire. The conquest of Britain under Claudius shows imperial expansion continuing beyond Augustus's cautious boundaries. Picture Roman legions crossing the channel that defeated Caesar a century earlier, establishing a foothold that will endure for 4 centuries. The Druids of Anglesey, with their human sacrifices and sacred groves, represent the kind of barbarism Rome claims to civilize. Boudicca's rebellion in 61 AD nearly destroys Roman Britain. Picture this Celtic queen, tall, fierce, her red hair flowing as she leads her warriors against Roman towns. The sack of Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium shows that Roman rule, however beneficial, remains foreign rule to those it governs. But Suetonius Paulinus's victory over Boudicca demonstrates Roman military superiority, even when outnumbered 10-1. Picture the final battle. Disciplined legionaries cutting down Celtic warriors whose courage can't overcome superior tactics and equipment. Roman civilization advances not through conversion, but through conquest. Nero becomes emperor at 16, guided by his mother Agrippina and the philosopher Seneca. Picture the early years of his reign: cultural flowering, public works, reasonable government. The Domus Aurea, his golden house, represents both imperial magnificence and imperial excess, covering a third of the city with gardens, lakes, and pavilions. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD becomes the defining event of Nero's reign. Picture the 7-day inferno consuming most of the ancient city, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. Whether Nero starts the fire or merely fails to prevent it, his response, blaming Christians for the disaster, establishes a pattern of imperial scapegoating. The first persecution of Christians under Nero seems almost casual, a way to distract public attention from imperial failures. Picture these early martyrs, ordinary people tortured and killed for refusing to worship the emperor, their steadfastness puzzling Romans who see religion as civic duty rather than personal conviction. Nero's artistic pretensions scandalized traditional Romans more than his cruelties. Picture the emperor performing on stage, competing in chariot races, touring Greece to win crowns in athletic contests. Romans can accept a tyrant, but they struggle to accept an emperor who degrades his office through public performance. The year of 4 emperors, 69 AD, shows the empire's resilience and fragility simultaneously. Picture the rapid succession: Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, each claiming legitimacy while armies march across Europe and Africa. Civil war returns after a century of peace, but the empire's institutions survive the chaos. Vespasian's victory establishes the Flavian dynasty and shows that emperors need not come from ancient Roman families. Picture this bluff Italian, a career soldier who jokes about becoming a god on his deathbed. Practical rather than pretentious, focused on rebuilding rather than glorifying himself. The Colosseum, begun under Vespasian, symbolizes both imperial grandeur and imperial brutality. Picture its opening games: 100 days of spectacles featuring exotic animals, gladiatorial combats, mock naval battles. The arena becomes Rome's theater of death, where imperial power displays itself through organized violence. The Jewish War, 66-73 AD, reveals the limits of Roman tolerance. Picture Jerusalem under siege, defenders fighting with desperate courage while Roman siege engines batter ancient walls. The destruction of the temple ends Jewish sacrifice and scatters the Jewish people across the empire, creating a diaspora that will outlast Rome itself. Masada's fall provides the war's final tragedy. Picture Jewish rebels choosing mass suicide rather than Roman slavery, their deaths on the desert fortress becoming a symbol of resistance that transcends its historical context. Rome wins completely, but victory feels hollow when enemies prefer death to surrender. Titus, Vespasian's son, rules briefly but memorably. Picture him during the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD, the emperor personally organizing relief efforts, while Pompeii and Herculaneum disappear under volcanic ash. The disaster preserves a moment in Roman daily life like an insect trapped in amber. Domitian, the last Flavian emperor, shows how imperial paranoia can destroy competent rule. Picture him in his later years, suspicious, isolated, seeing conspirators everywhere. His assassination by palace staff demonstrates that no emperor, however powerful, can survive when those closest to him lose faith. The five good emperors, 96 to 180 AD, represent the empire at its height. Picture Nerva, elderly and childless, adopting Trajan not from family sentiment but from imperial necessity. The principle of adoption rather than heredity ensures capable succession for nearly a century. Trajan becomes the empire's greatest conqueror, adding Dacia, Armenia, and Mesopotamia to Roman rule. Picture his column in Rome, a spiraling narrative of victory carved in marble, showing Roman legions crossing the Danube on boats of logs, storming Dacian fortresses, parading captives and treasure through Roman streets. Yet even Trajan recognizes the limits of expansion. Picture his deathbed confession that he's overextended the empire, his successor Hadrian's immediate decision to consolidate rather than conquer further. The empire reaches its greatest extent under Trajan but finds its sustainable boundaries under Hadrian. Hadrian's wall across northern Britain becomes the symbol of imperial limits. Picture this engineering marvel. 73 miles of stone barrier guarded by auxiliary troops recruited from across the empire. Germans, Gauls, Spaniards, and Africans served together on this remote frontier, united by Roman discipline and pay. The Bar Kokhba revolt, 132-135 AD, shows that Jewish resistance continues despite earlier defeats. Picture this Second Jewish War, even more bitter than the first, ending with Judea depopulated and Jerusalem rebuilt as a Roman colony. The name Palestine replaces Judea on maps, an attempt to erase Jewish connection to the land. Antoninus Pius rules for 23 peaceful years, showing that the best emperors are often those who do least. Picture his reign, frontiers quiet, provinces prosperous, the emperor content to govern well rather than seeking military glory. His nickname Pius suggests the devotion that makes good government possible. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, faces challenges his predecessors avoided. Picture him writing his meditations in a tent on the Danube frontier, Stoic philosophy helping him endure the burdens of power. His reign shows that even wisdom cannot prevent the problems that will eventually destroy the empire he served so faithfully. Marcus Aurelius dies in 180 AD, and with him dies the golden age of Roman peace. Picture his son Commodus, handsome, athletic, utterly lacking his father's philosophical temperament. The empire that reached its height under the adoptive emperors now begins its long, slow transformation under a man who prefers the arena to the throne room. Commodus rules for 12 years, increasingly detached from reality. Picture him fighting as a gladiator in the Colosseum, styling himself as Hercules, renaming Rome itself after his own person. His assassination on New Year's Eve 192 AD triggers another civil war, showing that the empire's stability depends entirely on the emperor's character. The Year of Five Emperors, 193 AD, demonstrates new realities of imperial power. Picture Praetorian guards auctioning the throne to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus pays 25,000 sestertii per guard for their support, but provincial armies have their own candidates, and superior force trumps purchased loyalty. Septimius Severus emerges victorious from this chaos, establishing the Severan dynasty through military might rather than constitutional legitimacy. Picture this African emperor, dark-skinned, speaking Latin with a provincial accent, more comfortable with soldiers than senators. His reign shows the empire becoming less Roman, more cosmopolitan. Severus's deathbed advice to his sons, enrich the soldiers and despise the rest, captures the new imperial reality. Picture the Praetorian Guard's doubled salary, the legion's increased privileges, the growing gap between military and civilian society. The army that once served the state now expects the state to serve it. Caracalla's reign reaches its climax with the Constitutio Antoniniana in 212 AD, granting citizenship to all free inhabitants of the empire. Picture this moment, the culmination of centuries of gradual inclusion, making every free person from Britain to Egypt a Roman citizen. But citizenship has lost much of its meaning when everyone possesses it. The baths of Caracalla show imperial architecture at its most magnificent and most impractical. Picture these vast thermal complexes, marble halls that could hold thousands, hot and cold pools fed by miles of aqueducts, gymnasia and libraries providing total luxury. They're beautiful, but they're also symptoms of an economy devoted to consumption rather than production. Severus Alexander, the last Severan emperor, tries to restore traditional values but lacks the strength to enforce them. Picture him dominated by his mother Julia Mamaea, respected by senators but scorned by soldiers. His murder by his own troops in 235 AD begins the crisis of the 3rd century. For 50 years the empire nearly dissolves. Picture the chaos. Over 50 emperors in 5 decades, most dying violent deaths within months of claiming power. Plague devastates the population. Barbarians cross every frontier. The economy collapses as debased coinage makes trade impossible. The plague of Cyprian, beginning around 249 AD, kills perhaps a third of the empire's population. Picture cities emptying as disease spreads faster than knowledge. Roman engineering and medicine proving helpless against biological disaster. The demographic catastrophe weakens every institution, military and civilian alike. Germanic tribes press across the Rhine and Danube, no longer seeking alliance but conquest. Picture the Alemanni reaching northern Italy, the Goths crossing the Black Sea to raid Asia Minor, Roman frontier defenses crumbling as troops are withdrawn for civil wars. The empire that once expanded relentlessly now struggles to defend its heartland. The Persian Empire under the Sassanids poses the greatest external threat. Picture Shapur I capturing the Emperor Valerian in 260 AD, using the Roman ruler as a human footstool before having him flayed alive. Roman prestige reaches its lowest point when emperors become trophies for foreign kings. Gallienus, ruling from 260 to 268 AD, begins the military reforms that will save the empire. Picture his mobile cavalry armies, new units unconnected to traditional legions, recruited from barbarian tribes, focused on speed rather than the heavy infantry that built Rome's empire. Change comes from necessity, not choice. The Gallic Empire 260-274 AD shows how thoroughly imperial unity has fractured. Picture Postumus ruling from Trier, creating a separate state that includes Britain, Gaul, and Spain. For 14 years, this breakaway empire governs more successfully than the central government, showing what competent administration can achieve. Zenobia of Palmyra creates another breakaway state in the east, styling herself as a new Cleopatra. Picture this Arab queen, cultured, ambitious, controlling trade routes between Rome and Asia. Her rebellion succeeds because the central government lacks strength to prevent it, not because her cause is just. Aurelian, 270-275 AD, begins the empire's recovery through sheer force of will. Picture this restorer of the world, marching from battlefield to battlefield, personally leading cavalry charges that shatter enemy formations. He reunites the empire through conquest, treating Roman rebels like foreign enemies. The Aurelian walls around Rome, built in desperate haste, show how far imperial confidence has fallen. Picture the ancient city fortifying itself for the first time since the Gallic sack centuries earlier, citizens working alongside slaves to build walls that acknowledge permanent insecurity. Rome itself needs protection from the world it once ruled. Diocletian's accession in 284 AD marks the beginning of systematic reform. Picture this Illyrian soldier, practical, energetic, uninterested in traditional Roman sensibilities. He sees problems clearly and addresses them directly, even when solutions require abandoning cherished precedents. The Tetrarchy, ruled by 4 emperors, represents Diocletian's most radical innovation. Picture the empire divided into 4 administrative units, each with its own Augustus or Caesar, coordination replacing centralization. The system works because it matches governmental structure to actual conditions. Diocletian's edict on prices attempts to control inflation through wage and price controls. Picture inspectors throughout the empire trying to enforce maximum prices for everything from wheat to haircuts, the death penalty prescribed for violations. The edict fails economically, but shows imperial determination to regulate every aspect of life. The persecution of Christians under Diocletian represents the old religion's last systematic attempt to destroy the new. Picture the Great Persecution beginning in 303 AD. Churches destroyed, scriptures burned, clergy imprisoned. But Christianity has grown too strong to be eliminated by force. Constantine's rise to power begins with his father's death at York in 306 AD. Picture this young man proclaimed emperor by his father's troops, beginning a civil war that will last until 324 AD. His victory at the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD changes not just Roman politics but world history. The vision before Milvian Bridge, whether dream, hallucination, or political calculation, transforms Constantine into Christianity's champion. Picture the Chi symbol painted on Roman shields, soldiers marching into battle under the sign of Christ. The empire that created Christian martyrs now creates Christian emperors. The Edict of Milan in 313 AD grants toleration to all religions, ending 3 centuries of intermittent persecution. Picture Constantine and Licinius meeting in northern Italy, agreeing on principles that seem obvious to modern minds but revolutionary to ancient ones. That conscience cannot be compelled, that faith must be freely chosen. Constantine's defeat of Licinius in 324 AD reunites the empire under a single ruler for the first time in 40 years. Picture the Battle of Chrysopolis, the last civil war of the ancient world, ending with the establishment of Christian monarchy that will endure for over 1,000 years. The foundation of Constantinople, in 330 AD, creates a new Rome perfectly positioned to control both European and Asian trade routes. Picture the dedication ceremony. Pagan and Christian rituals blended as Constantine establishes a capital that will outlast its founder by more than a millennium. Constantine's deathbed baptism in 337 AD symbolizes the empire's religious transformation. Picture the first Christian emperor receiving the sacrament only at life's end, ensuring salvation while avoiding the moral constraints baptism would impose on an active ruler. Political necessity and religious conviction find their balance. And so our long journey through Roman history draws to a peaceful close, like the sun setting over the 7 hills where it all began. Picture yourself floating once again above the Mediterranean, seeing how the world has changed since we started with twin brothers beside the Tiber River. The Rome that began as a simple city-state has become something unprecedented in human history. An empire that spans 3 continents, uniting peoples who speak different languages, worship different gods, live under different skies, but all call themselves Roman. The idea of Rome has become larger than any single place or people. Picture the Roman road stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Armenia, not just pathways for armies but arteries carrying ideas, customs, languages, dreams. A merchant from London can travel to Jerusalem using the same laws, the same currency, often the same language. Unity achieved not through uniformity, but through inclusion. The Latin language, once spoken only in a few Italian villages, now carries literature, law, and learning across the known world. Picture scholars in Alexandria studying Virgil, judges in Britain applying Roman law, soldiers on the Rhine frontier writing letters home in words that would be understood in Spain or Africa. Roman law, evolving from the simple 12 tables, has become a sophisticated system for governing diverse peoples fairly. Picture legal principles developed in Rome being applied to settle disputes between Greeks and Egyptians, between Gauls and Germans, between peoples who have never seen the Tiber but live under its protection. Christianity, born in a Roman province during Augustus's reign, has grown from a small Jewish sect into the empire's dominant religion. Picture churches rising in cities that once knew only pagan temples, the cross replacing the eagle as the symbol of Roman power. The empire that crucified Christ now rules in his name. The Roman virtues, discipline, duty, loyalty, courage, have spread far beyond their origins. Picture a British chieftain's son learning Latin grammar, a Gallic nobleman studying Roman history, an African merchant adopting Roman customs. They become Roman not by birth but by choice, by embracing ideals that transcend nationality. Yet Rome's greatest achievement may be showing that empires however mighty, must eventually change or perish. Picture Constantine's city on the Bosphorus, inheriting Roman law and Roman traditions but adapting them to new circumstances. The Western Empire will fall, but the Eastern Empire will endure for another 1,000 years as Byzantium. The barbarians pressing against Roman frontiers aren't destroyers, but inheritors, seeking to join rather than destroy the civilization they admire. Picture Gothic kings wearing Roman imperial regalia, Frankish nobles speaking Latin, Germanic tribes adopting Roman military tactics. They conquer Rome, but Rome conquers them in return. The fall of the Western Empire in 476 AD doesn't end Roman influence but transforms it. Picture Odoacer, the Germanic king who deposes the last emperor, ruling Italy under Roman law and Roman customs. The empire's political structure collapses, but its cultural legacy proves indestructible. Medieval Europe will build upon Roman foundations. Picture Charlemagne crowned as Roman emperor in 800 AD, the Holy Roman Empire claiming direct descent from Augustus. Renaissance humanists rediscovering Cicero and Virgil. Rome dies as a state, but lives as an idea. The Catholic Church becomes Rome's most enduring successor, preserving Roman administrative methods, Roman legal traditions, even the Latin language. Picture medieval monks copying classical texts in monastery scriptoriums, ensuring that Ovid and Livy survive the Dark Ages. Pagan Rome dies, but Christian Rome endures. Roman architecture influences building for 2 millennia. Picture the dome of St. Peter's Basilica echoing the Pantheon, the Capitol in Washington copying Roman temples, courthouses across America designed like Roman basilicas. Stone and marble carry Roman proportions into the modern world. The very words we use reveal Roman influence. Picture how Latin lives on in French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, languages that are Roman Latin transformed by time and geography. English, though Germanic in origin, borrows thousands of Latin words. We cannot speak of government, law, religion, or culture without using Roman vocabulary. Modern democracy draws inspiration from Roman republicanism. Picture the Founding Fathers studying Cicero and Livy, the United States Senate modeling itself on Rome's, the concept of checks and balances derived from Roman constitutional theory. The republic that died with Caesar is reborn in America. But perhaps Rome's greatest gift to humanity is the idea that peoples of different backgrounds can unite under common laws and shared ideals. Picture the modern European Union, NATO, the United Nations, all attempts to recreate on a global scale what Rome achieved in the Mediterranean world. As you drift towards sleep, picture one final scene, Rome in its eternal aspect, not as any particular moment in history, but as an enduring symbol of human ambition, achievement, and transformation. See the 7 hills beside the Tiber, ancient stones worn smooth by countless footsteps, ruins that outlast the empires that built them. The Rome of legend and the Rome of history merge in twilight. Picture Aeneas carrying his father from burning Troy, beginning the journey that leads to Augustus. See Romulus plowing the sacred boundary that grows into an empire spanning continents. Watch as Republic becomes empire, paganism becomes Christianity, Latin becomes the foundation of modern languages. Time flows like the Tiber itself, carrying away generations while leaving the landscape essentially unchanged. Picture Roman ghosts walking modern streets, Caesar crossing the Rubicon that flows still, Augustus declaring his achievements to senators long since dust, Constantine seeing his vision in skies that arch over the same ancient city. The tourists who visit Rome today walk where emperors walked, where gladiators fought, where martyrs died for their faith. Picture them standing in the Colosseum at sunset, hearing echoes of vanished crowds, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down like stone. They are pilgrims to a shrine that never loses its power to inspire. Rome endures because it represents something larger than any single civilization, the human desire to build, to create, to leave something permanent in a world of constant change. Picture the inscription on the Pantheon. Marcus Agrippa made this, still readable after 2,000 years. Stone speaks across millennia, promising that some human achievements transcend mortality. And so our story ends where it began, with Rome eternal. Not eternal in the sense of lasting forever. Nothing human lasts forever, but eternal in its significance, its influence, its place in the human imagination. Picture the words that Virgil put in Jupiter's mouth. To Romans I set no bounds of space or time. I have given them empire without end. Empire without end, not in political terms, for all earthly empires fall, but in cultural terms, in the realm of ideas and ideals. Every time someone speaks of civic duty, legal rights, representative government, or universal citizenship, Rome speaks through them. Every time someone builds with arches and domes, writes epic poetry, or dreams of uniting diverse peoples under common law, Rome lives again. As sleep takes you now, carry with you the image of Rome as both place and idea, the physical city beside the Tiber, with its marble monuments and ancient streets, and the eternal city of the imagination, where human ambition meets human achievement, where the best of what we've been inspires the best of what we might become. Rest well, knowing that you've walked with the giants of history, that you've seen the rise and transformation of the civilization that, more than any other, shaped the world we inhabit today. Dream of Roman roads leading to distant horizons, of aqueducts carrying pure water across valleys and centuries, of laws and language and literature that continue to nourish human civilization long after the eagles of the legions have vanished into memory. Rome is eternal because it lives not just in history books, but in the daily lives of everyone touched by its legacy. And in that sense, we are all Romans still, inheritors of traditions we may not recognize, speakers of languages shaped by Latin, citizens of nations built on Roman principles, dreamers of dreams first dreamed beside the Tiber River when the world was young, and Rome was just beginning its long journey through history. Sleep now, and let Rome's long story become part of your dreams, part of the great conversation between past and present that makes us human. From Romulus to Constantine, from republic to empire, from pagan to Christian, from ancient to eternal. This is Rome's gift to posterity. The knowledge that human beings can build something greater than themselves, something that endures long after its builders have returned to dust. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the gentle echoes of history, flowing like the Tiber toward the sea, carrying the stories of Rome into the endless future where all human stories find their home.